Hey folks, we're going to go ahead and get on the Magna and do the carb work that I talked about in the last video. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Before we get started, look in the comments on the milling machine video, okay? User or viewer Gordon sent me a message saying that I was when I was showing this seal, I said it was a 48 millimeter ID. That would be the shaft diameter, and he said, no, it looks like a 46 to me. And sure as hell, I look at it, and that is absolutely a 46. But this gets more complicated. Well, not really complicated, but interesting. So I immediately went online. I had already ordered a 48, and then I couldn't cancel it because it's already shipped, so that's all right. It wasn't that expensive. So I looked for a 46 by 72 by 12, and they're like non-existent. It must be a bad seal number. So I'm like, what the hell, or a bad dimension. So I come back out here, and I take this seal. Remember, this is the shaft that sticks down. This is the R8 collet side. And so this is the surface that the seal rides on. And if you look at this, that's not even close. Now, it's impossible to see this really because it's upside down underneath there, and unless you use a mirror, and I never did that. I never took a look at this. So I'm like, why in the hell would this be so big? You know, it's not that, it's a little distorted, of course, from prying it out, but it isn't that bad. And of course, the little springy deal is gone too. So I measured this up, and guess what? It's not even 46 millimeter. This is 45 millimeter. So I mic'd it up. Plus, I just used a scale like this. You can see that's 45 millimeter. And again, the numbers, when you convert imperial over to millimeters, is like 44.9, so that's 45 millimeter. So that's not the correct seal. They didn't even put the right seal in it at the factory. I don't know why. Probably all they had on hand. The overall OD of the seal is fine, and the height of the seal is fine. So if you're working on one of these, the first thing I would recommend you do is go ahead and mic this up. You don't have to take it out of the machine for that, because I think this is the witness mark for where it was originally rubbing a little bit, maybe in the early days. So you have a lot of stick out here. Mic this up. Verify you have a 45 millimeter spindle end. Then order yourself a 45 by 72 by 12 or a 10. If you're worried about the depth, you could certainly get away with a 10, but I wouldn't necessarily go any thinner as far as a height profile than a 10. So what I did was I went online, I got a 45 by 72 by 12 coming, but I bet you when I go down Monday to Bearings Marketing to pick up the bearings, I bet you he's going to have the correct seal in that size, because I didn't ask him about that. I asked him about a 48. So that's what happens when you got great viewers like you guys to correct me and save my bacon. So Gordon, I sure appreciate it, and I wanted to kind of add this at the beginning of the next video behind that milling machine video. Let's get back to the Magna. Close enough. All right, folks, welcome back. Time to get on the Magna, as I said in the milling machine video. We're going to pull the carbs off, get into that, and see what's going on, because it's just not running right. I'll go into that more deeply as I get into it. I don't want to make this sub-intro any longer than it has to be. We're eventually going to get this up in the air higher, and how I do that, I'll show you at that time, but essentially you just do it in stages with the air lift over there and then the hydraulic lift over here. And once you get them relatively level, there's a little, fudging around I got to do as far as the blocks go between that crossbar that locks it in place and the frame to get it as level as possible, because they don't even up. They're not even when they're at their stops. But it's not a big deal. I've done it a couple times before. But for now, we're going to leave it down. I just needed it up in the air a little bit more because I got to work on the top here. I got to get the tank off. We're going to take the tank off. You don't need to. I'll explain that again too as we get further on. We're going to be replacing a primary fuel delivery hose that goes from the primary tank to the secondary tank in the frame, which I have never ever seen available, ever, OEM or brand new. And I found one on Partzilla and I immediately snatched it up. They had one in stock. We'll discuss that too later on. I don't have it yet. It's coming Monday. So, but I do have all the other parts I need to get into on the carburetors themselves. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and set you up in a stand and we'll start tearing it down. I'm going to go over the service manual, not the criteria, the service manual instructions, the step-by-step instructions on how to get these carbs out of a Magna. I know how to do it. I've done it a number of times. But I would like to go over them with you briefly. I'll print them out. And that way you have an idea of the sequence that they want you to work with if you're working on one of these vintage Magnas. All right? Okay, I'm going to go through this step by step. First of all, you need the 8283 manual, not the 8384. And then when you're in the 8283 manual, there's two sections. There's one for carb removal for the Sabre, and then one for the V45 Magna. Make sure you're looking at the V45 Magna if you have a Magna. So the first thing you need to do is, according to this, is you check and see if you have at least 1/2 tank of gas or less. Reason for that is this tank's on a hinge back here, which I'll show you in a minute. You take these two bolts out on the sides of the front. The tank comes up and there's a prop bar, prop stand, whatever you want to call it, prop rod, I guess, inside there to keep the tank up. So you can do that, and then the reason why they do that is so you can get at the air cleaner for maintenance. But you can do that, or you can just take the tank off altogether, which is what I'm going to do because of the reason I cited before. I'm going to change that main hose. But I also recommend that you take the tank off anyway, because while you're in here to do carbs, it behooves you to do other maintenance, which I'm going to do as well. It'll be a separate video if I shoot it at all, where I'm going to do the valve clearance checks on this engine and do some adjustments because I know they need to be done. So this is the next step here. Besides lifting the fuel tank up, we're going to remove the seat, of course, and we're going to remove the air cleaner and air cleaner element and remove the air cleaner housing. We'll get to that, and when we get inside there, loosen the air cleaner connecting bands, the case, the whole air cleaner case, disconnect the spark plug lead clamps. We don't have those because we have coilover plug. So the next step, it gets complicated, not complicated, but messy. You got to remove these radiator hose covers. There's one on this side, one on the other side, because the next step is we drain and remove the radiator. Then we loosen the clamps on number 1, 2, and 1 and 3, 2 and 4 cylinder crossover pipes. Those are the metal pipes inside, which are really hard to get at. We'll raise it up for that off the ground floor, or where it's at right now at least, to get a little better access. We got to remove the crossover pipes. This is one of them you can see right here, all right, on number 2. So what you need to do is you're going to have to get all those out of the way. And if you don't have O-rings for them, get them now. Now those are fairly new O-rings because I went in here not too long ago and did this. Because they are notorious for leaking. But I can't remember 100%. So we'll get those out. What's the next step? Okay, the crossover pipes, that was that step. And let me go to the next page here. There isn't much more. Remove the air chamber top cover. That's the that plastic cover right there, which is it's underneath the air filter housing part. I'll show you when we get to that point. We removed various bolts, removed the thermostat housing, coolant hoses, temperature sensor wire, disconnect breather tube, blah blah blah. Remove all the. Now this is where the carb holders come into play. I've mentioned this on other bikes. On this particular one, you leave 2 and you remove 2. So remove all the number 1 and number 3 carburetor intake pipe bands. Okay, so you remove all of them. And then you loosen number 2 and number 4 carburetor intake pipe bands on the carburetor side only. Remove the carburetor assembly from the intake pipes. Remove the number 1 and 3 intake pipes from the cylinder head. So you actually take them out and get them out of the way. So there's 2 left. So 2 and 4 are still on the head. Then remove the carburetor choke and clamp, disconnect throttle cable, and we remove the carbs from the right side of the engine. All right, so that's the steps. Seems complicated, but it's not. I'll go through each one as I do it, and I'll explain it to you, and then we'll take the carbs out. Tank is pretty low, but I'm going to suck the rest of it out. Take these 2 bolts out, 10mm socket. They look like these. Drop it on the floor, too. It's part of the service procedure. This is what they mean by flipping the tank up. There's a prop rod in here. It goes up into a little doodad spot. This is how you would normally do some maintenance, like change the air filter and stuff on it, which is why this is the it's capable of doing this. There's very little fuel left in this, but I'm not sure how much. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and drain it and suck it out or whatever, and then suck it, and then right there is a pin with a cotter key. Welcome back, cotter, which doesn't look too good. And take that out and just pull the pin, and you can take the tank off once you disconnect the hoses. The hoses in question I'm talking about, kind of difficult to see from here. I'll show you if I can. The hose in question is right here. You can get a better shot of it right here. You can kind of see it running down. See that big one? There's a smaller one that crosses over it. I think that's a vent or overflow, something like that. And so the big one is your main discharge from the main tank down into the sub tank, which is right there. You know what? I may have already changed that hose. Now that I look at it, it's gray. I think the original was like orange, but we'll change it if necessary. But if not, I'm just going to keep the one I ordered in stock, because that's why I keep stuff in stock. Because that hose, if that goes, then we're in big trouble. So yeah, can't go too far on a reserve tank. So anyway, I'll do what I said I was going to do and take the tank off, and we'll come right back. Here's your best case scenario. I had no fuel at all in the main tank because I had run it down. I didn't realize that. So the fuel light is not on yet, and that's the only fuel monitoring on an old Magna like this. There's no active fuel gauge. And briefly, I'll explain how this works in case you're interested. The way this works is when the fuel light starts to come on, it'll generally start to glow, and then you know you're low on fuel. And that's because the fuel is monitored in the sub tank here, or the reserve tank, by what's called a thermistor, a thermal resistor. So this circuit here meters a certain resistance, and when it's inside the fuel, the resistance is a certain level. In other words, when the fuel is up into the main tank and this tank is brim full, thusly, and then when the fuel tank is down low, when it gets down, let's say to here in the reserve fuel tank, and this is out of the fuel, it has a different resistance, and it starts to turn that light on up here, the fuel light. The reason why it starts to glow is because it's not an instantaneous thing. Obviously, there's still some fuel splashing around if it just gets down to the bottom of that sensor resistor, which is like a little body thing that sticks down about yay far. But when it gets further and further down and there's no fuel contacting it, then that thing burns pretty bright. At that point, you really got to stop and get fuel, because you're probably down to about here. You might get about 25-30 miles left out of it. So that's how that works. So let's get to the rest of it here. I'll get you back in the stand to do that. By the way, these thermal resistors are rebuildable if you want. I did it once years ago, and I can't remember where I got the information from to tell me which resistor to buy for it, but there was a tutorial somewhere online that I read. It's probably still out there somewhere. Whoever wrote the tutorial on a forum or wherever it was, said this is the resistor to get, and I think I got it from Mauser or somebody like that. And then it's kind of tedious to get in there and desolder and resolder the resistor in, because it can't contact the body of the little frame thing it sits in. I wish I could find the one I have. I have a spare one. But I don't know where it is right now. If I can find it, I'll show you. But anyway, air filter cover, air filter. Now we're going to go ahead and get the actual air body off. There's a band clamp that goes around to the large round spot that's on this main air box. And so we have to reach in, do a classic reach around, and get that loosened up. All you got to do is take this 110 mil out, because there's like a little tab up front. Then you can pop that out. On mine here, the band clamp is accessible from this side between the frame and the air box itself. Main air box. Your mileage may vary. So I don't know about one that you might have. It may be different. Get out of there. Lord have mercy. One of these top hat washers is in there. Don't lose those. Those are important. Otherwise, you put too much force on the plastic tabs. That's what those are for, and you'll crack your plastic tabs. So if you don't have them, I call them top hat washers. Again, they look like a little top hat. So if you don't have those, get them. I have a bunch of them that I've accumulated over the years. Okay, so this is your main air box inlet. So this is where the air goes in, goes in through the filter. These things constantly are falling apart. As you can see, I fixed this one a number of times. It seems to be holding, but you know, this is that polyethylene or something plastic, and really nothing sticks to it very well. But so far so good. We'll leave her alone. This is just a drain, like a one-way valve drain, all right? In case you get water in there or something. Now, before I go into taking this top cover off here, I'm going to just get the covers off the side of the radiators, the radiator rather. There's two of them, one on each side, these two, and then we'll take this cover off. And then we'll get her up in the air so I can drain this easier without hurting my back. And we're going to need to get it up in the air now anyway. Wanted to do this top part, you know, while it's a little lower, so it's a little easier to do. So the higher I work, the lower I keep the bike, and vice versa, all right? But I'll get these off in this position, and then we'll get her up in the air, and then we'll continue. Now we start the dance. The dance. As soon as we get it to the first click, which we're not there yet, on the airlift, that's where we stop and we level the other one to match it. Yep, there we are. All right, now we're down on the release for the airlift, or not the release, the catch for the airlift. If I was doing a sidecar setup, I would be much more concerned about making sure that the two lifts are identical to each other in height, and I set a level across them with a couple of blocks, even blocks, you know, because of the lips on the edge of the lift here, and then I get them dead nuts level through whatever means possible. But for this job, it doesn't really matter too much. I'll put the bar in that goes across and locks up the safety bar to keep the thing up, because right now we're under the hydraulic pressure of the cylinder right now. And then we'll do whatever we need to do to get it somewhat level. But right now, it's not really all that critical. Oh, and by the way, in case you haven't noticed, I have the lift backwards. This is actually the head where I rode it up on. That's the foot end. The reason why I do that is so I can have the controls out here. So I have two holes drilled in that matches the pins on the ramp that would normally go on that end. So if you're going to do something like this, you need to do that, and you need to block up underneath this end because it's not designed to be ramped up on. It'll flip the lift upside, or not upside down, but it'll flip it up. So I have some blocks of 2x4 underneath there. So if you're going to do something like this and flip the lift around, make sure you do those two things. All right, so for once in my life, I got it up without any incident. And let's see, what are we going to do? Okay, I'm going to drain the coolant. You don't need to see that, but I'll tell you where the drain is on this in case you're interested. And this is really common, pretty much all these old bikes. It's going to be over near your water pump, either there or on your water pump. On this particular one, because the frame is actually part of the cooling system. The cooling comes into the frame and goes down. This is a removable section of the frame, by the way. If you were going to pull the engine out, it would have to come out this side, but we're not doing that. The carb's got to go out that way. So anyway, this is filled with coolant, and it goes down to another crossover, another pipe down here. But at any rate, actually into the water pump, I think. But it doesn't matter. There's a drain right here. Drop the side stand down, which I never use, and there's a drain right here. It's an M6 with an 8mm head bolt and a crush washer. You take that out, put a bucket underneath here, and drain all your coolant out. Take your radiator cap off, and you're good. Now I gotta pee. Now we'll go ahead and get this black cover off here. You just have a couple of screws. These are the ones on the ends are little stud screws. That's where the holes on those side covers slip over, and then there's a grub screw on this one that goes in the bottom and one on the side on the other side. It's a little different on the other side, but very similar. So you just take out these screws. Just mind where these go back in. Otherwise, you'll be like, what the hell? They got little slotted ends on them for a slotted screwdriver, and the rest of them are little Phillips. All right, so I've got that cover out. I dislodged and moved out of the way the choke cable. I took the electrical off, which is the temperature sender for the temperature gauge. Get that out of the way. I got to redo some of this. Looks like it came out of World War I. So now we're going to go ahead and get the radiator out. Just dislodge or disengage, remove, whatever. your hoses. We'll get the thermostat housing out of the way. All these hoses have to go as well. This is the end of the, well, you probably can't see it, but there's the two crossover tubes, one for 1 and 3 and one for 2 and 4, which are a real bitch to get out. I'm not going to be able to show you that. There's no way to get a camera in there, but you'll have to figure it out. I believe there's one 8mm headed M6 on each one, is like a clamp that holds it in place. So you take the clamp out, then you can just wiggle it out, the O-ring's out, but I can't show you that. But this part, we'll just get this done, and you know, the radiator will come right out. There's two large headed hex bolts in here, like wide heads, on each side that hold the radiator in place, along with, oh no it is, and there's one up across the top here, like a longer bolt that goes across. So essentially there's a hanger for it, and then there's two on the sides, all right? Pretty easy to do this part. The hard part we're getting to. Here's the main reason why you have to take these crossover lines out, these metal lines, because you can't take the carburetors out the right side with this sticking up. It's in the way, and I think the bottom one interferes too. It's almost impossible to get at those bolts that hold these in without dislodging the carb. So I'm going to do that first, and that way I can kind of move the carbs up out of the way a little bit, and then I can get in there and take them bolts out a little easier. I mean, not impossible, but almost impossible. So I'm pretty sure these won't go out the left side. The Sabres, on the other hand, I think are the ones that go out the left side, and I don't know if you have to do all this junk with them, but for sure you got to do it here. And man, these hoses are a fight. I had these off a couple of years ago, but they are a fight. Oh man, I'm beating myself up trying to get the damn hoses off. But anyway, that's why you got to do it the way you got to do it. Okay, folks, I have gotten, and I continue to get questions on getting these carbs out and back in on the V4s in particular. The problem with these carbs are, of course, the only time that the carb inlets directly and exactly line up with the cylinder head side and the carb holders is when they're fully down in their position that they live, down inside the carb holders. So the problem with that, of course, is you have an upside down V basically. So if you picture it this way, you have this going on, so one angle that way, one angle this way, and you're bringing it down like this. You're not bringing it down and it's able to articulate. It goes down directly like that. The answer to that, as far as putting them back in, we'll cover when I put these back in. But to get them out, you kind of just look at what you got and see what's going to be the easiest to start prying off. On this particular one, on this bike, the instructions say we're going to be taking off the carb holders for 1 and 3. This is 1 and that's 3. 1 and 3. This is 2 and that's 4. But the way it looks to get these out, I think I'm going to just try popping number 2 and 4 up out of these carb holders, which you're only loosening the top part, the carb side of it, and leaving the other side down on number 2 and 4. And then again, the whole carb holder is ultimately removed out of 1 and 3. I don't remember how I did it last time, but that's what we're going to do this time. I think I'm going to have to get a little... Now, you got to be really careful when you do this, but I'm going to need to get a little piece of wood in here to help me out. I don't really remember exactly how I did it, but it's one of these things where you do a little trial and error. Hopefully less error and more trial. We're getting loose. All right, let me make sure the other side's popping up. There we go. So that gets us 2 and 4 loose. Loose. And then we just got to pop 1 and 3 out here. I'm not showing you how to do this specifically because this is kind of risky. I'm just showing you how I'm doing it, all right? How you do it is up to you. There we go. That's number 1. Number 3 should come out pretty easy now. There it goes. There is, you know, see, this is another thing. There is a lot of fuel pooled up in the intakes, and if it doesn't evaporate before I get these out, I'll show you. Not so much on number 2, but 1 and 4 I can see it. And I forgot to tell you this before. I haven't told you this yet. That I've been smelling fuel out of this thing after you run it, and I could never find a problem with it. Yeah, number 4 is a little wet, but number 1's really wet. And this leads me to believe, again, that we have an overfueling issue with the floats and stuff. But it's just stuck. It does not want to cooperate too well. And getting these out are not easy either. There we go. There's numero uno. You can get them in and out, but it's a prick. There's a prick. I got gas. He's got gas. Smell gas too, I wonder why. You're just gonna pry around in here and be careful, that's all I'm saying. You know, if you're gonna do that. Oh boy. Well, I can't get that one off yet until I start. When I get the carbs over to the side, I can get that one out. That's the thing. You got to kind of do things simultaneously on this. So you do definitely want to remove the carb holders, though, from 1 and 3, like the instructions say. You need that room in there now, but they're loose, so I can pick them up and get in there and remove those bolts for the crossover tubes a hell of a lot easier. That's basically what I wanted to show you here anyway. All right, I got the crossover tubes out. This is what one looks like. It's the one for the back, I believe. 1 and 3. So these O-rings here, you definitely want to replace those. I don't remember if I have a set in stock. All 4 of them are the same for the 2 sides for 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. But the you know, it's a good practice to replace these. I think I might actually have some. Either that or these are they. I don't know, because I was in here not too long ago. I had to take the carbs out to, believe it or not, I had to take the carbs out just to put a new throttle cable in. There is no physical way to get the throttle cable in if you break a throttle cable without dislodging these carbs. So I think I may have burned those O-rings then, but they're relatively new, so I may or may not replace them. I don't know. Anyway, I might have them. I don't know. So now we got to try to move this over to the right side here, and there's another part of the directions here I didn't tell you about yet, which is kind of interesting. In this box right here, I'll show it to you later. It says it may be necessary to loosen the engine mount bolts and move the engine on its rubber mounts to provide clearance for the for carburetor removal. So that tells you that the engineers were like, hey, wait a minute, these are hard to get in and out. Maybe we ought to give them some help. Well, thanks a lot. Now, I know these will come out, but, oh, you know what? I forgot I got to take off this plate on the front here. There's a heat shield plate. I forgot about it. It's just 2 screws here. Let me do that real quick, because you're not going to get it out with that in place. It ain't happening. All right, let's resume. We got to get it out so far. Get this guy out of the way when we can. Got you guys in the sidecar. You're taking a sidecar ride now. It's a good spot for you. There it goes. Just requires some force. Here's your carb holder. Numero trace. All right, now we got a little bit more room, maybe, going. But see, now they'll come pretty straight out when you get to that point. So now we can get the throttle cable off. See, those come out pretty easy once you do that part. Let me get a 10 mil. Like I said, I did these throttle cables a short while ago. I don't know, a year ago, because it broke up by the grip while I was riding it. Luckily, I wasn't very far away from the house, maybe a mile. What I ended up doing was turning the idle up by hand, just reaching down and cranking the knob up, you know, and then just putting it like in second gear, just letting it take me home. And then once I did that, I got home. And then once I did that, I cursed. I said potty mouth words. And then I went online and ordered a new throttle cable set for it, which is, of course, a push-pull. So you got to do both of them. Both. Okay. Good or done. That'll come right out. Fuel line and all. There you go. Carburetors. Whoa. Carburetors. Now, before you do anything else, you take some paper trowels and you plug your holes. All right, so that's all there is to getting these out of the Magna. It is a pain in the ass, but once you do it a couple times, I could have had these out a hell of a lot quicker if I wasn't filming for you guys, of course, but I'm not complaining. Just saying. All right, calm down. Gee whiz. So, but I wanted to show you how that's done on these particular bikes, these old Magnas. It is a pain in the ass, no question. Compared to the VFR, which is stage left to you, right there, it is way easier. Pull the tank, release some band clamps and doodads, and they come right up. This guy, not so much, but could be worse. Could be on a VMAX. Okay, guys, that's it on this video. The next one's going to be on the carbs themselves, where I go into them and show you what's going on with them, if anything. I don't know. Wink, wink. Maybe I know, maybe I don't. Maybe I've already shot some footage on that, and maybe I already have an idea what the problem is. You're going to have to wait for that video to find out. Again, this was only about getting the carbs out of one of these classic or vintage Magna with the V4s. I have worked on a newer one a couple of years ago. Newer by, what I mean by that is like 90s, a Magna 2 or something like that. And it's pretty much the same, so this will carry across a number of model years. But like I said, that's it on this one. You'll have to wait for the carb video. So until then, like, subscribe, share. You know what to do. Ring the notification bell and you get notified when I put that and other crap like this up. Till then, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.